Maxine Ross was halfway through her morning tea when the motion alert chimed from her security system. She squinted at the tablet on the kitchen counter, expecting to see a squirrel or maybe a wandering cat triggering the front yard sensor. Instead, a sleek, iridescent vehicle she didn't recognize sat squarely in her driveway, a thick cable snaking from the car's rear port directly into the external outlet mounted beside her garage. She stared for a moment, confused, then stood up with a slight groan, tugging a faded cardigan over her flannel pajamas. Outside, the early morning mist clung low to the ground, and the air smelled of ozone and cut grass. The car was completely silent, no idle hum, no blinking dashboard lights. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal in the weak sunlight, and there was no discernible logo or license plate. Maxine approached slowly, arms folded, eyeing the charging cable. It was definitely plugged into her outlet, her own installation. From years ago when she'd briefly considered getting an electric vehicle before deciding she didn't drive enough to justify it. The cable adapter didn't even look standard. It wasn't Tesla, not Rivian, not anything she'd seen on the market. It had small blue lights that pulsed in a slow heartbeat pattern, and a tiny readout screen that flickered characters she didn't recognize, some alien mix of English, Mandarin, and what looked like Cyrillic. She turned back toward the house and tapped her phone to replay the security footage. The camera caught a strange warping blur in the air at 3:42 a.m. right above the driveway. Then, with a soft flicker, the car simply appeared. No sound, no driver emerging, no lights. It sat idle for a full hour before the charging arm extended from beneath the chassis and automatically connected itself to her outlet. What in the hell? She muttered, scrolling back and forth over the clip. No one got out. No one went in. Wasn't one to jump to conclusions. She believed in science, not fantasy. Her 32 years as an electrical engineer at the Department of Energy had made her skeptical, detail-oriented, and completely intolerant of nonsense. But this was beyond strange. She marched back out to the driveway and tapped the surface of the car. It was warmer than it should have been, and the second she made contact, a soft voice chimed from somewhere near the vehicle's front end. Please do not disturb the unit during rapid phase calibration. Temporal orientation is in progress. She yanked her hand back. The hell it is, she snapped. Then she went inside and called the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher sounded amused. Ma'am, is the car blocking your vehicle? No, Maxine replied slowly, but it's stealing my power. Unfortunately, electricity theft is usually considered a civil matter. Do you recognize the vehicle? I don't even recognize the decade it came from, she muttered, after a long pause. The dispatcher suggested calling a tow company if she wanted the vehicle removed. But when Maxine phoned the local lot, the driver showed up, took one look at the strange vehicle, and refused to touch it. This ain't registered, he said, frowning. I ran the VIN through the tablet. Doesn't match anything on file, not even gray market imports. You're sure it's not one of them show cars? Did it look like a show car when it hacked into my electric panel? The tow truck driver muttered something about liability and left. By mid-afternoon, Maxine had posted the entire encounter to our LegalAdvice, hoping someone could tell her if she could legally remove this thing from her property. Responses flooded in, most joking, some serious AFU claiming they'd seen similar vehicles and warning her not to get too close. One user replied simply, "Ma'am, that's a time crap, you might want to unplug it before it finishes." Charging Maxine couldn't sleep. She lay in bed watching the security feed on her tablet like it was a thriller movie she didn't want to admit was real. The car hadn't moved since yesterday, but the cable still glowed faintly. According to her smart meter, her electricity usage had tripled since it arrived. She even watched the power meter spin faster, like it was panicking. By morning, she'd had enough. With her gray curls tied back in a frizzy bun, Maxine pulled on her work gloves and marched out with a multimeter and a custom diagnostic reader she'd built herself back in 2003. She had spent her entire adult life studying electricity, running diagnostics on military-grade grid systems, and debugging hardware for DARPA before she ever considered retirement. If something was leaching power from her house, she was damn well going to know how. She popped open the panel on her outdoor outlet. It looked normal at first, but as she ran the probe across the voltage feed, the reader jumped erratically. A second later, the device shut down, just died in her hand. Maxine scowled and tapped it. Nothing. She tried a second reader. Same thing. She'd never seen anything like it. That was when she noticed something else. Her garage lights had started to flicker. A low hum emanated from the wall, not from the wiring but from the structure itself, as if something was vibrating at a subharmonic frequency just out of reach. Her wind chime trembled slightly even though there was no breeze. She went back inside and logged into a local utility account. Her usage chart for the past 12 hours looked like a roller coaster, huge spikes at irregular intervals, with no obvious cause. Worse, there was no record of where the excess power had gone. It was as if the system knew she was using more power but not what for. Maxine returned to Reddit, updating her original post. This time she included screenshots of her usage, a short clip from the security camera showing the car appearing, and a photo of her fried multimeter. The thread exploded overnight. Dozens of users offered half-serious theories about aliens, pranksters, and government experiments, but some posts were more unsettling. One commenter, using the handle chronobound42, said, "That's not just a leech, it's a phase leaper. You're lucky it hasn't triggered a cascade event. Disconnect it now, before the resonance feedback destabilizes your property lines." Maxine didn't know what to make of that. She tried clicking the user's profile, but it had already been deleted. Another person DM'd her with what looked like a decryption key and instructions on how to scan the writing on the car's charging port using a modified QR code reader. Against her better judgment, she tried it. The result wasn't in English. Instead, the screen displayed something like a legal document, fragmented but clear enough to read a few lines. Authorization of emergency temporal requisition per Interchronal Statute 12F. No property laws of 21st century United States are applicable to phase nexus operations. Statute, she muttered. From what jurisdiction? She sat back in her chair, staring at the screen, heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. Her headache was building again, like it had been ever since the car showed up. She tried to concentrate. This wasn't just someone stealing power. This was something else. Something designed to draw energy in a way that no current physics could explain. That evening, just as she was reviewing thermal readings from her circuit box, her lights dimmed again, then everything shut off. Her house went completely dark. Seconds later, a low pulse of bluish-white light radiated out from the car like ripples in a pond. When her backup generator kicked in, she raced to the window. The vehicle hadn't moved, but now a translucent ring of faint symbols circled. The car, rotating slowly. Her power was back, but the ground beneath her driveway was humming again. That's when she realized the car wasn't just charging, it was building something. It was 2:17 a.m. when the knock came at the door. Not a normal knock, more like a rhythmic series of taps, precise and mechanical, as if someone was using a metronome to make contact. Maxine bolted upright from her recliner, where she'd dozed off with her tablet in her lap. The screen still displayed Reddit messages arguing whether she should call Homeland Security or just pour sugar in the thing's charging port. The knock came again. Tup 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 tup. For short, 3 fast. Morse code. She couldn't remember. She picked up the flashlight and an old taser she kept by the door, not because she expected it to work against some futuristic car invader, but because old habits died hard. Through the peephole, she saw a figure standing perfectly still on the front porch, dressed head to toe in a silver-gray bodysuit that shimmered like the car. The figure's helmet was reflective and seamless, like liquid chrome. No face, no eyes. Maxine opened the inner door but kept the screen locked. "You've got 5 seconds to explain who you are and what your toy car is doing on my damn property." The figure raised one gloved hand and tapped a small badge on its chest. A tiny projector flared to life, hovering in the air between them. A blue holographic ID badge with rotating glyphs and English subtitles. Agent Dalen, Chrono Division, Temporal Transit Regulation Authority, Mission Emergency Nexus Stabilization. Civilian contact authorized. "Great," Maxine muttered. "You're either a lunatic or the worst kind of cosplay." The helmet retracted with a quiet hiss, folding into itself like origami. The man beneath looked unremarkable. Late 30s, pale-skinned, sharp features, eyes that shimmered faintly with artificial implants. "He looked tired, ma'am," he said in a flat tone. "I deeply regret the intrusion. Your property was selected as a phase nexus, anchored due to its stability profile and proximity to fault-neutral electromagnetic fields. I attempted to avoid direct contact. You materialized a spaceship in my driveway and fried half my home, and you're telling me this was an accident? Not an accident. A requisition." Dalen gestured calmly. "Under Interchronal Statute 12F, properties within select energy resonance zones can be temporarily accessed for emergency recharge and rephase. Your home qualifies. Your time. You retain full ownership. In mine, it's a registered stabilization node. I didn't sign anything. In your frame, no. But the temporal rights were established by extrapolated continuity authorization. It's complex, but legal." Maxine clenched her jaw. "You stole my electricity. Technically, your grid sold it to us through a quantum ledger. The value will be compensated post-temporal alignment." That's not a real sentence. It is in 2179. She stared at him. Her fingers tightened around the taser. "So let me get this straight. You're from the future. You parked in my driveway without asking, drained my power, almost melted my circuit box, and now you're saying I can't do anything about it because your law books haven't been written yet." Dalen nodded. "Correct, and I understand your frustration. But interfering with a vehicle could collapse the stabilizer field. That might result in extensive temporal redundancy." "What does that mean?" "Think of it like 3 copies of your house existing at once, slightly out of sync, and occasionally exploding." Maxine blinked. "Okay, so what can I do?" "For now, remain calm. Don't unplug anything. Do not physically interact with the vehicle. If you'd like, you can submit a formal complaint to the Temporal Oversight Board. I can provide a link. I don't want a damn link, she snapped. I want you and your time-hopping electric parasite off my property. Dallin hesitated, then bowed slightly. Understood. As soon as the vehicle finishes rephasing, we'll vacate. Estimated time 37 hours. With that he turned and walked down the porch steps, returning to the glowing machine like nothing had happened. Maxine stood behind the screen door, heart pounding, head full of questions, none with answers that made sense in her own century. By the following morning, Maxine's property had become anything but quiet. Her phone buzzed constantly with Reddit notifications, news alerts, and 3 separate voicemails from a Department of Energy contact she hadn't heard from in over a decade. Word was spreading videos of the car were now circulating online. Despite the strange digital corruption affecting every upload, something in the vehicle's field distorted image files, scrambling data, and embedding a watermark none of Mac's followers could trace. The watermark simply read, Nexus 07, do not interfere. Maxine's front yard was now surrounded by tall, glowing stakes, hexagonal rods that Dallin and 2 new agents had driven into the earth at exact compass points. The rods pulsed softly and created a faint humming perimeter around the car. According to Dallin, it was a soft containment field to prevent sympathetic dimension drift. Maxine had stopped asking for clarification. The answers made her head hurt. One of the new agents introduced herself as Varel. She looked younger, but her presence was sharper, more assertive. She didn't wear the same chrome uniform as Dallin did. Her suit had matte black panels and a strange insignia Maxine couldn't interpret. Varel had taken over much of the operation, setting up strange floating terminals that hovered above the grass, and constantly updated with scrolling strings of light-infused data. Why my house? Maxine finally asked, standing with her arms folded while watching one of the rods adjust its pitch mid-hum. Varel tapped a panel, not looking up. Your property sits on a rare geothermal null point. It's one of only 7 that exists within a specific resonance band detectable from the future. You think of it as ... a coincidence. We see it as infrastructure. You mean like a node, a power conduit, closer to an anchor. Varel gestured to the car. When a chrononaut jumps, they need fixed points in time to triangulate arrival and departure. Your driveway provides temporal friction, slows time enough to allow stabilization. Maxine exhaled, frustrated. So basically I bought this place in the 90s because I liked the quiet, and it turns out I unknowingly parked on a time travel freeway off-ramp. Exactly, Varel said, and actually smiled. Maxine turned to face Dallin, who was typing something into a floating interface. I want to know what you're doing to my house, and I want it in writing. A contract, not some floating alien badge. Dallin paused. We can upload an agreement to your neural profile, but I'm guessing you don't have one. No, I have a mailbox and a printer. Use those. A tense silence passed between the agents before Dallin finally nodded. We'll draft something interpretable in your legal framework. I'll convert it to 20th century standard contract law. Just then, another flicker lit the air, and a third vehicle appeared. This one larger, jet black, with red trim, and a lower profile. It shimmered differently, as if it was phasing in and out of visibility. Maxine stepped back instinctively. Varel's eyes narrowed. Unscheduled arrival. From the new vehicle emerged a figure in dark armor, bearing a crimson insignia on their chest. No helmet, cold eyes. This one didn't approach politely. This is unauthorized territory, Dallin warned. The newcomer sneered. By whose authority? She didn't opt out. Her land's on the ledger. Maxine looked between them. Excuse me, who are you? The man turned to her. The Bureau of Historical Continuity. We maintain proper causality. These they're destabilizing it. Maxine threw up her hands. Okay, great. So now there's a turf war from the future in my driveway. Dallin stepped forward, shielding her slightly. This property is under Nexus protection, and we're contesting that jurisdiction. The new arrival growled. You've overreached. Temporal law is not absolute, not here. Maxine's heart raced. She realized that whatever was happening wasn't just about stolen electricity anymore. Her house, her life was now the center of a legal and scientific battleground spanning centuries, and none of them seemed particularly interested in asking for permission. You said, please expand chapter number 5 in 600 words. Without heading, said. The next day, Maxine received mail, not email, not a pop-up hologram, but a thick envelope, hand-delivered by a drone that looked like a cross between a hummingbird and a stapler. It landed on her porch, scanned her retinal signature through the window, and dropped the envelope with a polite mechanical chirp before zipping into the sky. Inside was a contract, printed on something that looked like paper but shimmered faintly. Under her lamp, the document bore the header Intertemporal Tribunal Civil Dispute Protocol 17.4, Nexus Class Property Claim. It was 63 pages long and written in dense legalese spanning 3 languages and English Future Standard, and something that appeared to be made entirely of geometric shapes. Maxine groaned, made a pot of coffee and got to work. She posted the document on our LegalAdvice, hoping anyone could help interpret it. Within minutes, a user with a verified attorney badge, Time Lawyer Juris 82, appeared in the comments. This is a standard class and temporal loophole contract, they wrote. You're being pre-compensated in futures for energy and space usage rights in a post-chronal era. You should not sign without representation. Great, Maxine muttered. I need a lawyer who hasn't been born yet. That same user messaged her privately and offered assistance through an AI avatar. 10 minutes later, a program named Lexian appeared on her tablet. It introduced itself in a smooth, British accented voice, claiming to be licensed in 8 jurisdictions across 5 centuries. I specialize in cross-temporal litigation, it said, and you, Miss Ross, have one hell of a case. Maxine had her doubts until Lexian began outlining what the contract meant. It turned out that a property wasn't just being used for temporary power draw. It was being indexed into a future energy lattice, a network of anchor points, tied together across space-time, allowing chrononauts to leap safely between moments in history. Her house would effectively be part of a permanent infrastructure that transcended linear time. They're trying to pay you in post-dated energy credits, Lexian explained, which means you won't see compensation unless you're alive in 2181. And even then, only if causality hasn't voided the transaction. They want to mortgage my timeline, Maxine snapped. Exactly. And the nexus field is already integrated. If you don't contest this now, your property becomes a fixed anchor, and trying to alter it after the field stabilizes could erase part of your historical continuity. In plain English, if they win, moving to a new house could result in a version of you never existing. Maxine stared at the screen. Well, that's motivating. Lexian filed an emergency injunction with the Intertemporal Tribunal, citing violation of unconsented anchor binding under Statute 6 Epsilon within the hour. A glowing disk of light appeared in her living room and unfolded into a digital courtroom interface. Figures in elaborate robes flickered into view, most of them humanoid, some distinctly not. One had no face at all, just a spinning ring of blue light where its head showed.